And hello, everyone. Welcome. Happy Tuesday to you. You're listening to the Scoreboard here on WSIC. No phone calls today. Today's episode was recorded at an earlier time. I am not here live in the studio at the time of the airing, but it is Tuesday. All of the information that we are talking about is current as of today. Real quick, an apology for yesterday. Wasn't able to record the show, running back and forth between areas here with the station, and just couldn't find the time to record, edit, post a full-length show for you that would have been worthwhile and worth your listening. Not just going to throw something together for the sake of throwing it together. It's got to be a good product, which is what we have for you here today. We're going to have a little bit of fun talking about football. Normally, we reserve football for Mondays, but because I wasn't able to record on Monday, we're going to go ahead and get into the weekend slate of divisional games. The NFL has moved on. We are in the championship round, conference championship games, that is. They'll be taking place on Saturday and on they'll just be taking place on Sunday. Only one day of playoffs for the NFL this week. The wild card round, the divisional round, both of those had Saturday and Sunday, but as we move ahead here into the conference championship games, both of them are going to be on Sunday, 3 o'clock. It'll be the Commanders heading into Philadelphia's for a NFC East showdown for the NFC Championship game. And then one of the most recognizable postseason matchups over the past few years, the Buffalo Bills on the road heading to Kansas City. How did we get there? Well, we will go over that a little bit later on in the show. We're also going to talk about the national championship game in college football, which was last night. Ohio State and Notre Dame. Ohio State got it done. They got it done. They end up winning the national championship game by a close margin. Now, I thought it was going to be a blowout at one point as we get into halftime and we come back, and then all of a sudden, Ohio State's got a nice 24-point lead in the third quarter. All of a sudden, here comes Notre Dame storming back into the game. They get it down to 8, but the final score, 34-23, Ohio State holds off the hard-charging Notre Dame Fighting Irish for the national championship, 34-23. So we'll talk about the game a little bit. Riley Leonard had an okay game. I was very surprised by the game plan for Notre Dame, and we'll look into their actual game stats just to kind of see where things could have gone a little bit differently. I'll tell you right now, I know where things could have gone differently. It's very obvious when you take a look at the statistics of the game and you see who was actually involved in the game. So we'll get to that a little bit later on. We're also going to go over some men's high school basketball today. Yes, the men's high school basketball scene is continuing on. We had some games from Friday that we're going to talk about. We have some games going on later on today as well. So we're going to get into the men's basketball scene. Also, a little bit of hiring news in the NFL. The Bears have hired the Lions offensive coordinator, Ben Johnson. Little bit of news for you there after the Lions lose in the divisional game. Some other things as well going on around the world of sports, so we're going to get into that as well. But as we start out most shows, we'll go ahead and dive into the high school basketball season, starting as we always do with Statesville High School, who is now on a nice 4-game winning streak. 9-6 is the record for Statesville. They are 5-1 within the 3A Western Foothills Conference. The only teams that are better than them right now are East Lincoln, who is 13-3, 6-0 in the conference. They're having a great year. and Hickory High School, who's also 5-1 in conference, but their winning percentage overall is better at 8-2. Now you might notice 8-2, 9-6. That's a few games different between the number 2 and number 3 teams in the conference. Yeah, Hickory High School had kind of a light schedule this year. So they still have about the same amount of games that they play, but conference games, but the non-conference games are a little bit different this year. It looks like Statesville had quite a few more than Hickory did. So Statesville High School, most recently on Friday, they played St. Stephen's High School. They got the win at home, 75-51 was the final score in that game. Statesville scoring some points in their most recent games, which is definitely good to see. Looking at their numbers here, Caleb Tillman, senior with the Statesville Greyhounds with 21 points in the game. He was the leading scorer for the Greyhounds. So Statesville, 9-1. They're back in action tonight, and they are going to be at home again. Tonight's a really important game within the conference standings. They play Hickory High School. Yes, Hickory, we talk about them a lot during football season. A couple of years ago with the state championship. This year, they almost got back to the state championship game. So there's a lot to talk about with that. But Hickory High School's basketball team is also really good. So Statesville and Hickory will square off 7:30 tonight at Statesville High School. Moving on to South Iredell High School. This is one of the schools in the area that's just been struggling recently. And the struggles continue. They have now extended their losing streak to 6 games, and it's just been a rough 6 games. The closest game that they've had during this losing streak was their loss to Rocky River High School. The final score, A.L. Brown High School. That's the closest game they've played so far. That was on Thursday, and the final score of the game was 73-60. That's the closest game that they've played in the past 6 games. It's been a really rough stretch for South Iredell. They sit 4-13 on the year, still have yet to win a game in the 4A Greater Metro Conference. It's been a really tough season for South Iredell. Before we head to the commercial break, we'll talk about North Iredell High School, who's also struggling this year. They are boasting an 8-game losing streak. So North Iredell, South Iredell, a couple of schools that are having some tough times here in the middle part of the year. An 8-game losing streak. Their overall record is 4-12. They do have a conference win so far this year, so 1-5 within the conference for North Iredell, but with an 8-game losing streak and a 4-12 record and not much remaining in the season, it's going to be a real struggle for them to end up making these playoffs. We're going to go to our first commercial break of the day, ladies and gentlemen. Don't go anywhere. We got a good show lined up for you. We're back after this. And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. The Scoreboard, segment 2. A reminder, today's episode was recorded at an earlier time. It is pre-recorded content, but today is Tuesday, January 21st. So if you're listening to this on a Tuesday, all the information is current and up to date. We're talking about the high school basketball season, men's basketball today. Tomorrow we'll get into the women's side of things, but we were just talking about some of the directional Iredell schools, South Iredell, North Iredell, both of those schools in major losing streaks right now. And not only that, some of the games have just not been competitive. I'm looking at North Iredell. I'm looking at South Iredell. Here are some of the final scores that North Iredell has had in their past few games. And it's tough. 74 to 45, 48 to 21, 84 to 21. I'm a little dyslexic right now, I feel like. I got those numbers way wrong. 40, not 40. We're going to figure this out. 84, there we go. 84 to 61, 88 to 47, 73 59, 88 47 again, 78 35. Those are blowouts. Almost every single one of them. So unfortunately for North Iredell, I just don't think that they have the team to do it this year. And an 8-game losing streak, only one win within the conference. Better luck next year. I think that's the moniker we're going to have to go with for North Iredell because I just don't see them making this comeback. Moving on to West Iredell, a school that's actually having a pretty decent season up till recently. A 4-game losing streak for West Iredell. Now their record sits at 9-7 overall. Remember, they were 9-3, 2-2 in the conference, or 2-0 in the conference. They were looking great. And then all of a sudden, 4 consecutive games that they dropped. Now they lost a nail biter against Statesville High School, 78-76. Other than that, there have been a lot more blowouts. 93 to 50, 96 to 61. Hopefully, West Iredell can get things back on track tonight. Now, West Iredell plays North Iredell tonight. This game is going to be at North Iredell High School. So if you're in the area looking for a basketball game to attend, that's a directional Iredell rivalry matchup game, if you will. North Iredell, West Iredell, 7:30 tonight at North Iredell High School. I'll tell you what, West really needs to get a win here. They're a team within the area that has a chance to not only make the playoffs, but go a few rounds deep here. Recently, though, they've had some rough games. Hopefully they can turn it around against North Iredell. A lot of conference games remaining. Season is not yet over. Got to keep that in mind. It is not yet over. Plenty of time to turn things around. We'll go a little bit farther south towards Lake Norman here. Mooresville High School. The Mooresville Blue Devils are 15-2 on the year. One of those schools a little farther south of us that just always seems to figure it out. They always seem to have good sports teams. Now, I know they're having a down year on the women's side of basketball, but the men's side, 15-2, undefeated in the conference. Most recently, they played A.L. Brown, and they almost doubled the score on them. 82-44, the final score in that one. Now, Mooresville not in action tonight. Their next game is going to be on Wednesday. And who might they be playing on Wednesday? Well, just the number 6th ranked school in North Carolina, just the number 38th ranked school in the country. That would be Lake Norman High School. The Wildcats are 16-1 on the year, with their only loss of the year coming to Milton High School, which is in Milton, Georgia. That's a good basketball team there. They're 13-5. They are ranked 36th in the nation and number 5 in the state of Georgia. Comparing that to Lake Norman, 38th in the nation, number 6 in the state of North Carolina. That's not a bad loss. It really isn't. Lake Norman is 16-1. They are 5-0, undefeated in the Greater Metro 4A Conference. The only 2 teams that are undefeated in that conference are Mooresville and Lake Norman. Then it's Hickory Ridge at 3-2. So they are only a couple of games back, but still a little bit of time before they're able to really compete for this conference. Now, Lake Norman and Mooresville will square off tomorrow. That is a big game. That one's going to tip off at Lake Norman High School, 7:30 p.m. when we begin that one. Mooresville and Lake Norman at Lake Norman High School at 7:30. Battle of the number 1 teams in the 4A Greater Metro Conference. That's your high school basketball scene for you right now. Continuing to update you on everything going on there. We may see if we can get a player or two from some of these local schools onto the program. Remember last year we talked with Caleb Tillman up in Statesville, very well spoken. Maybe we can get him back for his senior year. But I will continue to update you on what's going on in the high school basketball world because we're getting close to the playoffs. Only a handful of games remaining for a lot of these schools. It came up on us quick. I told you January is going to happen. Once we get to January, all of these games are going to come fast and furious, and we're going to fly through the month of January with basketball season. Then we're going to get to February. You have a few compact schedules there, but it's spread out just a little bit more. Here we are. We only have a few games left in January. Mid-February, regular season ends, and we get into conference tournament play. So, some things to look forward to there. It's time to talk about the NFL. The 2024 divisional playoff games. Where do we want to start? Let's start with the Chiefs and the Texans, the first game of the weekend. The public discourse on the Chiefs has never been worse. Remember 2018, 2019, when the Chiefs were superheroes, when they were America's team because, well, they were beating the Patriots. And then Tom Brady went to Tampa and those two teams played in the Super Bowl and we said, go Patrick Mahomes. It's crazy how fast public opinion can change because right now nobody likes the Chiefs. Unless you're a Kansas City fan, nobody's liking the Chiefs. They got some calls during the Saturday playoff game against Houston that were unpopular. And the Chiefs come out victorious in this game, 23-14. There was a safety in there. It was an interesting game. It was a really, really interesting game. 23-14, the final score. Now, I didn't think that the Texans really were a force to be reckoned with this year. Just something about the schedule that they played, the games that they played, the stats they were putting up that I wasn't really all that impressed. And they walk into Kansas City and they put up a fight. Now, we probably could have assumed that they were going to put up a fight against Kansas City because they are not blowing anybody out this year. Kansas City is mortal. They are beatable this year, but you just have to play solid football. Too many mistakes for the Texans, too many penalties for the Texans ultimately is what really ended up getting them off the rails. Now, one thing that I found really interesting about this game, the penalties. Houston was penalized twice as much as Kansas City, 8 penalties to 4. And the turnovers, there wasn't a single turnover in this game. No fumble, no interceptions. Now, you had a turnover on downs. I'm not going to count a turnover on downs as a turnover. I get it. It is a turnover, but it's a completely different situation. And nonetheless, even while protecting the football, Houston just wasn't able to get it done. Patrick Mahomes, 16 of 25 for 177 and a touchdown. That's all he needed to do. You know, the offense wasn't otherworldly. It was not a great offense. But when you look at what the Texans did, they just didn't capitalize. They were able to get the yards. They were able to move downfield, drive downfield. They just couldn't get it into the end zone. Houston outgained Kansas City 336-212 on the game. Over 100 more yards for the Texans than Kansas City. Finish. Put the ball in the end zone. You got to finish again. You cannot settle when you play the Chiefs. Field goals are not going to beat the Chiefs. It's just not. And we saw that here when the Texans played the Chiefs. That is just not going to happen. If somebody's going to dethrone the Chiefs and prevent the three-peat, you got to put the ball in the end zone. Field goals are not going to cut it. They just aren't. Kansas City, the supervillain of the NFL now, moves on to host the AFC Championship game. And I don't know if I really want to get into the penalty discussion on were the Chiefs beneficiaries of bad calls? I mean, there's always bad calls. And it feels like anytime there's a bad call that goes in the Chiefs' favor, it only happens on national television for some reason, where everybody can see it and the reaction is blown out of proportion. But at the same time, I saw some of the things that Mahomes was doing, the way he was just kind of lollygagging when he got to the sideline. It's not a good look. Maybe we'll talk a little bit more about this on the other side of the break. Don't go anywhere, ladies and gentlemen. We're back after this. Welcome back. It is the third segment here on the Scoreboard. Another reminder to you, today's episode is not live. We are pre-recorded, but today is January 21st. It is a Tuesday. This is being aired on a Tuesday. All the information is current. We were talking about Kansas City and Houston and the game and the penalties and the unnecessary roughness and roughing the passer and some of the calls, hits to the head that the Texans were getting, and they looked questionable. They did. But I don't think that it was so egregious to where the NFL world should be rolling around in a puddle of their own tears because the Kansas City Chiefs keep winning because they keep getting the beneficiary of these penalties. I don't think so. I just think they're a good team. Now, they're not the best team. They are not the best team in the NFL right now. They might have had the best regular season record, but we already talked about it. How many times could one different play, just one difference, have made a difference? Blocked field goals, missed field goals, a toe that was a pinky toe out of bounds. You know, maybe if you trimmed his toenails, he would have been inbounds. Talking about game number 1 of the year against the Ravens. The Chiefs easily could have gone 10-7. Very easily. They could have gone 10-7, but they didn't because they have a good team, because they work as a team. And here they are going to yet another AFC Championship game for 15 consecutive years. For 15 consecutive years, we have either had a Brady or a Mahomes in the AFC Championship game. Dominant. That's what that is, dominant. And you look at what's going on in the AFC, and you hear that name Tom Brady, and you think about the other AFC quarterbacks that were around when Tom Brady was dominating the league. Phillip Rivers, you got Peyton Manning. We'll throw him in there because he always had some really good battles. But this guy, Mahomes, and it has something similar to Brady, where he's keeping people from winning Super Bowls. He's keeping Josh Allen from winning Super Bowls. He's keeping Lamar Jackson from getting himself a Super Bowl. And we've seen it time and time again. Last year, the Chiefs end up beating Baltimore in Baltimore. This year, Baltimore ends up losing to the Bills, who now has to go slay the dragon in the Chiefs. It's just a situation where you look at it and you go, man, we went back-to-back in the AFC with dominant quarterbacks that are going to eliminate good players from the playoffs who are just in the wrong place at the wrong time, and they're going to struggle to win a Super Bowl. Look at the NFC right now. It's wide open. Who is the dominant team in the NFC? I don't know. I would have thought it was the Lions. And it was the Lions, but the injuries finally caught up with them. They just weren't able to stop the Commanders. Couldn't do it at all. But who is taking the reins in the NFC? Is it going to be Jaden Daniels? It could be. He's looking really good. It's definitely not Jalen Hurts. It's definitely not Jared Goff. Sam Darnold, it can't be him. Is it Matt Stafford? I don't think it's Matthew Stafford. Who's the dominant player in the NFC? I don't know. Who's the dominant quarterback, I should say, in the NFC? I don't think we have one. We have a lot of really good quarterbacks in the NFC. And we have great quarterbacks in the AFC. You have Mahomes, you have Allen, you have Lamar. I'll throw Justin Herbert, Joe Burrow in there. I mean, the list goes on. And these are players that aren't going to win much because they're going to run into the big bad bullies of the AFC, the Kansas City Chiefs. And here they are again playing for an AFC title game. Let's move on from the Kansas City talk to another game from the weekend. Second game of the weekend was the Washington Commanders at the Detroit Lions, and I was wrong. I said I couldn't see it happening. I just could not see the Commanders with a rookie quarterback going into Detroit and winning. And they proved me wrong. The defense played great, and that is what they needed to do because we knew that the Lions' offense was going to put up numbers, and they did. They scored 31 points. But when you look at Jared Goff's numbers, he was just above 50% passing. That's not good. He threw a touchdown, but he threw 3 interceptions. One of them got taken back for a touchdown. That's not a winning formula right there. Jahmyr Gibbs had a good game. Jameson Williams had that big touchdown run, but the Commanders were just the better team. The defense played good enough. The offense put up plenty of points. Jaden Daniels was good, 22 of 31 for almost 300 yards, 2 touchdowns, and no interceptions. He took care of the ball. Detroit lost a fumble. They also threw 4 interceptions. They lost the turnover battle 5-0. That's bad. If you're following along at home, not getting a turnover is bad. That's not how you win football games. Washington won the time of possession battle. They were very even in yards, with Detroit having 521, Washington having 481. So the difference in the game was the turnovers. I mean, the passing yards were within 20 yards of each other. The rushing yards for both teams within 20 yards of each other. This was an evenly matched game. I don't feel bad for the Lions. I feel bad for the Lion fans, but I don't feel bad for the Lions. It's their fault. It's really Jared Goff kind of had a end of career in LA game where at the end of his LA Rams career, he was questionable. He kind of went back to that after having a year where a lot of people thought he should be an MVP candidate. And I agree, he should have been a candidate or at least talked about a little bit more, especially after he had games where he was going 16 of 16 for 250 yards and 3 touchdowns. I mean, that's MVP level stuff right there. But it wasn't meant to be against Washington. The Washington defense played great. They had a pick 6 on there, which was amazing as well. And man, I'll tell you what. Washington looks good. Now, I don't know if they're good enough to beat the Eagles in the NFC Championship game, but they look really good. So we saw this last year with the Texans and their rookie quarterback, C.J. Stroud. They looked really good. They go into the playoffs. They get eliminated. C.J. had a little bit worse year than he did last year. They still make the playoffs. They win a game, but then they can't beat Kansas City. I could see the same trajectory for Washington because remember, they were 4-12 or 4-13 last year. They had 4 wins. It was a bad year. They get Jaden Daniels. The team gets revitalized. The rookie jump before we get to next year where it's like, hey, we've all seen you for a year. Now we know how to play you. I could see Washington taking a step back next year, but they're here now. Take advantage of it. Commanders beat the Lions 45-31. And then we had 2 games on Sunday, starting with the Rams and the Eagles, and what a sight it was. I know NFL Films was very happy. This game started with nothing on the ground. You could see the grass, and it ended in a snowstorm. And one of the greatest photos I've ever seen of the NFL is Saquon Barkley on his breakaway touchdown run in the 4th quarter with the snow as the background and just nobody within him, within 4 or 5 yards of him. They're all chasing him, and Saquon's gone. That's a beautiful photo. We're going to get into this game, the Rams and the Eagles. We got one more segment coming up here. So I want to get into the Rams-Eagles game. Then we'll talk about the Ravens-Bills, a little bit on Ohio State and Notre Dame. I don't know if we'll have time for news today because I do want to get into this day in sports history. So don't go anywhere, ladies and gentlemen. We'll take our final commercial break of the day here. When we return, talk about this Rams-Eagles game, talk about the Bills-Ravens, and then we'll get into the College Football National Championship. Don't go anywhere. I'm back after this. Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to the Scoreboard. A reminder to you, everything here today is pre-recorded. It is Tuesday, January 21st, though. So all the information that we're talking about is current for Tuesday. But as always, I always say this, there's something that could happen. Something's going to happen in between now and 5 o'clock. It always does. And we'll have to talk about it tomorrow. Final segment here on the program. We're talking about the Rams and the Eagles. The Rams, man, they almost made a comeback. They almost pulled it off. But the Eagles get the win 28-22. And I found it pretty funny watching this game, seeing the Rams finally move the ball late in the game. I mean, you look at how this game went, and the Eagles didn't really dominate the game. I mean, Jalen Hurts went 15 of 20 for 128, no touchdowns, no interceptions. If they would have stopped Saquon Barkley, this game would have been a lot different. It would have. And Jalen Hurts had that long touchdown run early in the game to really set things up. But Saquon Barkley, 26 carries, 205 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He's great. He is a great football player. And he's the reason that the Eagles beat the Rams, because when you look at it, the Rams had more yards. They had way more passing yards. I mean, it wasn't even close. The turnovers were a problem, but you know, when it's snowing like that, especially later in the game, it's going to be hard to hold on to the football. We saw it in the Sunday night game with the Bills and the Eagles. Or I'm sorry, with the Bills and the Ravens. But this was actually a pretty evenly matched game throughout the game. It just so happened to be that Philadelphia got out to that 2-possession lead late in the game, and the Rams weren't able to do anything about it. And there was a safety in this game. I guess my question moving forward is the health of Jalen Hurts. We saw him take a couple of hits. We saw him grabbing at his knee a couple of times. He got rolled up on real bad. And when he took that safety, I mean, he just didn't move. He stood there and took it because he couldn't move. So I'm curious what the health and status of Jalen Hurts moving forward is, how active he'll be able to be as we get into the NFC Championship game. Will he be able to move the way he normally does? Because his legs are a big part of this offense. Nonetheless, it was the Eagles winning against the Rams. And for the Rams, you kind of look at it and say, this was a saved season. I wouldn't believe that I'm out of the question by saying that. Because you start off the year 1-4. Teams don't normally make the playoffs when they start the year 1-4. They don't normally get to the divisional game when they start 1-4. They don't usually beat a 14-win team when they're 1-4 to start the year. But they ended the year wonderfully. They had that winning streak to end the year. And I'm going to take away the Seattle game. I understand that that's technically the last game of the year for them. But when you look at the situation that they were in, we didn't even really necessarily need to see the Rams playing their top players, which they didn't. It was Jimmy Garoppolo that was in there playing. So I'm not even really going to count that game as a loss to the streak that the Rams had at the end of the year. But they beat a lot of good teams at the end of the year, including the Buffalo Bills. They beat a few playoff teams. They beat the Vikings earlier in the year. But I still think this was a saved season for the Rams. And they should look back on it and say, look, we made a run. We were in playoff mode for quite a while. And we made a run and we had a chance at the end of the game. And that's all you want. You get a chance on that final drive. You're down inside the 30-yard line. You can't take a sack. You just can't do it. And I'm surprised that these coordinators don't draw up more plays late in the game where the running back stays in to block to be the safety valve for the quarterback to just throw it at his feet at the end of the game or at the end of a play when he's about to get sacked. Just throw it at his feet so you don't take the sack. Well, that didn't happen late in the game for the Rams. They took some big sacks, and the biggest one being the next to last sack on third down, because that fourth down throw, it was just not close. It wasn't even close. And there was pressure. And the Eagles came out victorious. So the Eagles of Philadelphia move on to the NFC Championship game. Now the final game of the weekend was the Ravens and the Bills. This was, up to this point, the game of the year, in my opinion. 21-10 for the Bills at halftime. They score only 6 points in the second half of the game, with a couple of field goals in the fourth quarter. Not great for the Bills, if you ask me. You go up 21-10, and it's like, great. That is the start you needed. Now you need to build on that. And they didn't. They were flat in the second half. And all of a sudden, here come the Ravens. 2-possession game. They score. The Bills make a smart decision and kick a field goal on the goal line. And I get it. A lot of people might look back at that. But now that we know the outcome, like before we knew the outcome, you were looking at the Bills on that final drive, fourth down, and I think it was 4th and goal from the 4. And you're thinking, okay, you got to go for this and put them away. You got to score the touchdown, put them away. But a field goal puts you up 8, which means you cannot lose the game on the next possession. So the Bills opt for the field goal, which was the correct decision. Even in the moment, I said, you cannot go for this. You have to kick the field goal. You have to go up 8. Otherwise, a touchdown drive by the Ravens, and you're now losing. So they kick the field goal. They go up 27 to 19. The Rams get the ball with about 3.5 minutes to go. They drive right down the field and put it in the end zone. And a drop pass ends the season for the Baltimore Ravens. I never would have thought that Mark Andrews would be the one to cost the Ravens their season. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that the entire loss was on him, but dropping that 4th down pass, yeah, or a 2-point conversion, I'm sorry. Dropping that 2-point conversion, yeah, if you would have caught that, it'd be a tie game. Now, I do want to pump the brakes on that a little bit by also saying that the Ravens scored with 1.5 minutes remaining in the quarter. And even if they had tied the game, I think the Bills were going to march down the field and kick a game-winning field goal. There was just too much time. But we never got that chance to see if it would happen. The Bills end up victorious at home. The only home playoff game they're going to get, or the last home playoff game they're going to get this year, because now they have to go on the road to Kansas City. And we'll talk about that one a little bit later on in the week as we get towards the second half of the week when we start previewing our NFL championship weekend. Last thing I want to talk about before we get into this day in sports history was the college football national championship. Here's the problem for Notre Dame. Why didn't Jeremiah Love touch the ball? He had 4 carries and 2 receptions. That's it. Why didn't he touch the ball? Was he injured? I understand he had a little bit of a knee thing going on, and we heard about it the week before with the hurdling. And hey, we're going to hope that he doesn't hurdle. And he said he's not going to hurdle, but he ends up hurdling someone anyway. But why is Jeremiah Love not touching the football? Why does he only have 4 carries? That's like the complete opposite of what made you successful. And I get it. Riley Leonard, the quarterback designed runs, they were working a little bit better, but you cannot give up on the run game. This game wasn't over. They could have used the entire first half of the game to say, you know what, we're really going to try to establish Jeremiah Love. And they didn't. And they ended up losing. That first drive, the first drive that Notre Dame had, the entire game should have been like that. Ground and pound, 18 plays, grind it out, and punch it in the end zone. It just didn't work like that. And Ohio State, the number 8 team in the country, or the number 8 team in the tournament, I should say, in the bracket, because they were not the number 8 team in the country at the time, ends up winning the national championship. And keep this in mind. Going into the playoffs, Ohio State was number 6 in the college football playoff rankings. If we had a 4-team playoff, they never would have had a chance to win it. The 12-team playoff was a success. I do expect to see some slight tweaks, namely conference champions getting just an automatic bid, not an automatic bye. Other than that, 12-team playoff, first year ever, I deem it a massive success. I do. Let's leave you guys with something real quick on this day in sports history, because we are fastly approaching the end of the program today. It was on this day, and I had it in front of me, and now I seem to have lost it. On this day, the Pittsburgh Steelers beat the Dallas Cowboys 35-31 in the Super Bowl. It was Terry Bradshaw with the MVP. Thanks everyone for tuning in today. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Until then, have a great night, everyone.